Welcome to Evilive, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how many members of the cult are needed to bring down Leanne? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Servant, Season 4, Episode 6, Zoo. So my initial thoughts of this episode are, I can't tell if I really like it or if I am sort of like meh about it. I mean, the animals turning against Leanne sort of flies in the face of everything we've been shown thus far. So I'm really curious about the sort of structural cosmic rules here of what we're supposed to understand. And then sort of the turn of events that happened at the end, I felt like we already saw that. Like we already knew that Leanne was the little pageant girl that Dorothy had seen. So we're sort of retreading old ground in a way, and it's a little bit strange. Anyway, those are my initial thoughts. So this was directed by Celine Held and Logan George, written by Devin Conroy and Ishana Knight Shyamalan, and it premiered, of course, this past Friday at February 17th. The setup is like this. Leanne wants to do something for Dorothy and Sean, and ultimately for Grayson the baby. And so she sets up this birthday party, but she sends out an Evite the day before she's going to have the birthday party, and it's like 6 months late. And so, it's a bunch of just rando people who end up showing up that maybe either happen to live in the neighborhood, and then, of course, the Turner's father and his young wife show up as well. But they've got a Dorothy with a little Toto dog is sort of working the backyard there where their party's being hosted. They have a petting zoo, which is taking up most of that space. And the petting zoo seems to be kind of painful to sit through if you're an adult. The kids seem to be enjoying it. And of course, the people running the petting zoo seem to be enjoying themselves. At least they get to showcase these beautiful little animals. And it's everything from like snakes and tarantulas to little pot-bellied pigs, which are more adorable than anything I've ever seen in my life. But then also like goats, like straight up big goats, which is weird at like a little kid party in this tiny little confined space. So they have all these cages that the animals have to be in when they're not out being showcased. It's a very, very strange little setup. But added to all of that is the discord that is sort of underlying everyone's motivations here. First, it starts with Leanne forcing Dorothy to go downstairs to join the party, and Dorothy doesn't want anything to do with it. But Leanne tells her that the party's going to happen whether she's there or not. And so ultimately Dorothy decides to go down and at least celebrate the party, for her son, supposed son, with them. When Leanne takes the baby into the little petting zoo area, a snake actually starts attacking Leanne. And so she sort of backs up, and then a goat starts biting her dress and sort of like rips her dress a little bit. And so that freaks Leanne out. And so she goes back inside to go get another dress. And as she goes upstairs, that's where a group of cult members, 3 of the people that came to the dinner party, the episode before, but I think it was supposed to be like the night before or 2. And they overtly attack her. They mark her with something on her forehead. And then the guy that's holding her down says, get the knife. We need to finish this right now. She's getting too powerful. We have to stop her. And so as they're trying to get the knife in order to hurt her, Leanne figures out a way to sort of break out of all their embrace and fight back and ends up like literally defeating them all. She calls the homeless people former cult members and tells them to come up here and get rid of the 3 bodies and the baby. And they used a little like stranger's baby or one of their babies to lure Leanne up into the upstairs area. So then she dresses again. She goes back downstairs. Julian and Sean are having a lot of arguments and fights. They just, Julian is basically the lapdog for Leanne. He's doing whatever she says. And Sean can't seem to get through Julian's head that there's something fundamentally wrong with Leanne. He's refusing to believe it, or he's completely deluded, or he's somehow enslaved in some way. But he refuses to acknowledge that Leanne is either, if not supernatural, then something is going on there. He refuses to acknowledge that there's any sort of like supernatural, power in Leanne. But even though it's showing this stuff happening, he just doesn't acknowledge it. It's very strange. Let's see. Dorothy realizes that she did in fact meet Leanne before when Sean is telling her how hard of a life that Dorothy has had, and she's never had I'm sorry, how hard of a life Leanne has had, and Dorothy, just doesn't understand that Leanne came from this forced pageant family that was in a cult, and it really sort of messed her head. And so when she finally joined the Turner family as a nanny, that's when she finally started understanding what family meant. And so she really does genuinely love this family unit, even though she's trying to keep it together in arguably the worst way possible. Um, Toto ends up like breaking away from Dorothy, the actress playing Dorothy, not Dorothy Turner, the character. And Toto runs up to Leanne and bites her in the calf area of her leg. So Dorothy is taken down into the basement apartment where the nun, or not nuns, but I don't really know what to call them. They're like nannies for Dorothy Turner. They're like live-in nurse helpers. So this is the sort of thicker, more round nurse that's taking care of Leanne. And so Leanne sort of like lays back and closes her eyes and sort of rests for a little bit. As she like opens her eyes, that nanny or that nurse is like injecting her leg with something, which makes her pass out. So now we know that this nanny, at least, if not both of them, are part of this cult. She wakes up with some disco music playing. She's all tied up, and there's a fire going in the hearth behind her. And the rotund nanny nurse lady is like whipping herself on her back, talking to Leanne, saying how she doesn't understand. She's not in control. Why does she deserve all this opulence? This is absurd. She needs to pay just like everyone else. And as she's whipping herself to this music, she goes over to the little cupboard, pulls out that sacrificial dagger that they've been trying to use to kill Leanne throughout all of the seasons thus far, and she moves forward. And that's when Sean and Julian upstairs are actively fighting each other, like physically fighting each other, because they're both so frustrated with the other person trying to tell them that it's either okay and Leanne is not a monster, or that Leanne is in fact a monster and some sort of supernatural creature that's, destroying their family. And so they go to physical blows and they're sort of wrestling around when all of a sudden smoke is pouring out of the upstairs fireplace because of the downstairs fireplace, and the flue isn't open. And so immediately Sean realizes what's happening. Julian kicks in. He's like, oh no, Leanne's in danger. Almost as if he was like psychically called or something, but he could have just put one and one together, and goes running downstairs to go save Leanne. And Sean's like, no, let it happen, Julian, let it happen, trying to get him to stop. He runs downstairs, dives in front of Leanne in front of the fire as this live-in nurse lady's just standing there with the dagger that just falls out of her hand. And Leanne is clearly doing something psychic to her or something. She's got like that look that the actresses always have when they're doing something psychic, like this intense stare of concentration at someone. And this nurse's body is like inflating, not quite as comical as Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory inflating, but definitely like blowing up. Her skin, her hand is getting very sort of Cabbage Patch doll looking. I don't know if you guys remember those. And like her mouth and face, or her lips are like inflating, like it's the worst allergy you've ever seen anyone ever have. Her tongue is sort of sticking out and it's green, and she lies over, falls down dead as Sean runs down there and sees the whole thing happening. He calls 911, and we sort of cut to Dorothy sitting in the front room. And the thin live-in nurse comes in, the other pair of the live-in nurses that was helping her, as an ambulance drives off in the distance. She's like, I had no idea. I've lived with her. I've worked with her for like 20 years. I had no idea she was in a cult, which makes everyone watching believe that this woman is in fact also in a cult, even though she didn't seem to be when she was tested by Leanne in an earlier episode. And she's like, look, Leanne has problems. She's latching on to some sort of religious figurehead, and when the cult is not there for her, she seems to have latched onto you and your family, and she sees you as a new religion, and she's not going to let your family go. You need to do something about this, sort of urging her to if not turn Leanne over physically, personally to the cult, then she has to destroy Leanne herself in some way. And then she, resigns. She can't live there anymore. Clearly, there's too dangerous for her with Leanne, knowing that her partner was part of the cult, and then clearly would be suspecting that she would also be a part, as is the audience. So Dorothy goes over to the tape. She's taped every single one of her episodes since she's, her entire career And she looks through a bunch of the episode DVDs titles for the pageant that she had gone to at the beginning of her career back in 2011. And she sees, in fact, there is a Leanne, a little girl Leanne, who was at the pageant from like Midwest Michigan or something. And, or maybe Wisconsin, I can't remember at the moment. But she realizes that that is actually Leanne, and she is interviewing her in person back then, sort of imprinting on Leanne's mind that she will then in the future come and help her out when Dorothy needs help. And so we realize that this is a long-standing situation that is clearly set up from Leanne's childhood in the pageantry circuit. These sort of abusive, parenting pageants. Pageants are like arguably the worst thing that you could ever do to a child. I mean, well, you could, there's abuse, which is horrible. So it's like the second worst thing you could do to a child. And then that just sort of sets us up in the future where Sean and Julian are sort of sitting on the back porch in the devastation of what was the party. There's no one else there. Leanne's in the kitchen eating some cake. And they're sort of talking to each other like, look, we're brothers. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say these things to you. We were not there for Dorothy when she needed us. We perpetuated this lie. We have to fix this somehow. And finally, Sean admits that yes, there is a problem and we need to deal with it as he's looking at Leanne throughout in the kitchen. Oh, I almost skipped over the part. There's this really great part where the goats are so aggressive towards Leanne that one of them actually busts the glass door and shatters the glass all over, causing Julian to drop the birthday cake and it falls on the floor. And Leanne is just like, we have to continue the birthday. We have to keep this birthday for the child and make him feel, Jericho, make him feel good. I called him Grayson earlier, but it's actually Jericho. I don't know why I said that. And she didn't seem to even care that the goat busted through the window. In fact, none of them really seemed to react to this crazy wild animal busting through the window as the zookeepers, grab him before he can come inside and attack Leanne. But they're just sort of shocked, staring at the turn of events rather than doing anything about it. Like, I would be running toward the goat, grabbing it by the horns and forcing its ass outside, not just standing there shocked. It was a very strange situation. It didn't really, their reaction did not match the gravity of what was happening around them. It was like they were, it was like they didn't know what was happening in front of them. And the director put the goat in post. That's how strange their reaction was. It just didn't feel like the same moment that we were watching in their reaction. It was very, very strange. But anyway, ultimately we know that everyone in the Turner family is now finally on board together, unified front, to do something, we don't know what, about Leanne. They know the cult members are there to get them. The cult members know that they are all willing to help them in not doing anything to prevent them from capturing Leanne. And so they're regularly, breaking in and trying to steal her and stuff and sort of either kill her or capture her. And ultimately, we're sitting here with 4 episodes left wondering, how is this going to play out? So my favorite aspects of this episode were the animals attacking Leanne, even though, again, like I mentioned in my initial thoughts, it doesn't really make sense. Like, Leanne was in control of the doves before, so she's okay with birds, but not reptiles and barnyard animals, like goats or snakes. Like, it doesn't really, in the iconography, like if Leanne is evil, then you would think that they would want to showcase the goats because, people associate goats with the devil and stuff like that. So why wouldn't that be on Leanne's side? And that's what I mean by a little bit of inconsistent and not really understanding the rules that they're trying to present for Leanne as this sort of supernatural entity. I'm really looking forward to how they're going to ultimately explain it because I'm very, very curious. But, what I disliked about this is probably the inconsistencies, the inconsistency in the actors to the situations that they're put in, how they behave. Like Julian, not seeing how Leanne is clearly like a crazy person. He just doesn't get it. He's so pussy whipped. And it's a very strange thing to see because she is so clearly twisted in her head. Like so obviously twisted. He must be so pussy whipped to not see that. or just willfully ignorant. Like he sees it, but he just doesn't want to acknowledge it. And in either case, it's not believable. And as a viewer, it's a little bit frustrating. So it's nice that at the end of this episode, we finally see the Turners uniting and moving forward. But ultimately, because of all of that, I had to give it 4 evil eyes again. You know, this was arguably worse than last episodes, but it did have some really great redeeming moments, like the fight between the cult members and Leanne. I like how she's not like a superhuman in her fighting tactics, but she uses the environment, whether it's a candlestick or scissors on a table, in order to defend herself. And even though, you know, they get her overpowered at one point, the cult members' stupidity, you know, we often attribute this idea of invading cult members as if they're trained assassins or something, like ninjas, but they're just religious nut jobs. You know, they're not specially trained SWAT force people. They're just, you know, a bunch of stupid brainwashed humans. And so they're as bumbling as anyone else is, as Leanne is at time, as you know, when she's trying to defend herself. And so I like that there's that back and forth, that ebb and flow of who's in control, who's got the power in the moment, yet she still can fight her way out of it. I think that's kind of cool. In any case, that's sort of the best and worst of this episode, and that's why I gave it 4 evil eyes out of 5 evil eyes. I would really like every episode to really just knock it out of the park. I don't want to be critical at all, but you got to work with me here, Apple TV. You know, if you're producing this show, you got to make them winners, and arguably 4 is not that bad anyway. So you know, it's a pretty good evil eye score if there could be an evil eye score. So that is going to do it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you have a fantastic week, and let me know what you thought about this particular episode. Did it stand up to the other episodes in quality and excitement, or was it lacking like I found it just a little bit? Let me know in the comments, and as always, remember, the evil spelled backwards is live, so get out there and be evil.